Right, good evening, everyone. Hi there. Welcome to Hackney Council's Planning Subcommittee this evening. My name is Councillor Steve Race and I'll be chairing this evening's meeting. The meeting will be recorded and is being live streamed on YouTube, and councillors taking part in voting this evening are present here in the council chamber. If any committee members are accessing this meeting remotely, they're reminded that they're not counted as being present for the purposes of the Local Government Act 1972, and you may not vote on any items under consideration. At the discretion of myself, you may, however, continue to contribute to the discussion and participate in a non-decision-making capacity. Welcome to members of the public and press who join us this evening to participate and also observe. And for anyone joining the meeting remotely via Google Meet, there's a chat function. However, please only use this to raise IT-related issues. As chair of the subcommittee, I won't be monitoring it. Meeting participants are reminded to turn their mobile phones off or put them on silent. Also, please note that any persistent disruptive behaviour will result in you being asked to leave the meeting. In the event of an internet outage, we'll adjourn the meeting and then come back and continue once it's resolved. Firstly, I'll turn to my fellow planning subcommittee members and ask them to please introduce themselves. I'll start with Councillor Desmond down at the front.
Councillor Jessica Webb, Hackney Wick.
Councillor Ifra Samatar, Shackwell.
Councillor John Narcross, Haggerston.
Councillor Ali Sadat, Kings Park.
It's new, Councillor Levy.
Councillor Michael Levy.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. There are various council officers present at this meeting this evening, both in the room and joining us remotely, including the following. To my left, we have John Sang, who's the DM and Enforcement Manager, and to my right, we have Gareth Sykes, who's our Governance Services Officer. We also have our Legal Officer, Christine Stevenson, and ICT Online, we have Mario Karamem to keep us all going online. The following planning case officers will be presenting the following planning applications this evening. So item 5, Bethune Road, will be Gerard Livett. Item 6, Amherst Road, will be Catherine Nicol. And item 7, Springdale Mews, will be Gerard again. Some of you joining us this evening would have contacted the governance officer in advance of this meeting to register to speak. Objectors to the applicants and objectors to the applications and representatives of the applicant are also in attendance. Before we continue, I'll briefly outline how the meeting will proceed. We'll hear each planning application in turn, summarised by the relevant planning officer. We'll then hear a 5-minute statement from any objectors, followed by a 5-minute statement from any applicants in the room. If there's more than one speaker from an applicant or an objector, they will have to agree amongst themselves beforehand how they'll split that 5-minute speaking time. Members of the planning subcommittee will then be free to ask questions of the planning officer, objectors, or the applicant. And in my role as chair of the planning subcommittee, I'll ensure that members have everything that they need to make a decision, that objectors and applicants have the opportunity to set out their case, and that the meeting runs properly. I won't be taking any contributions from the floor. You must have given notice to the governance officer before the meeting to register to speak. The deadline for that was 4 p.m. yesterday, and the speakers list is now closed. Subcommittee members are not representing either their wards or their political parties. Members will make decisions on the basis of any site visits they've made, what they've read in the published application report, and of course what we hear this evening. We must make any decision on an application in accordance with the Council's development plan, which includes the Council's local plan, LP33, and the London plan, unless relevant material planning considerations indicate otherwise. Subcommittee members are reminded not to take into account or discuss non-material planning matters, and when taking a decision, members should not have allowed themselves to prejudge any application prior to this meeting. Similarly, if a member has any interests relating to an application on the meeting agenda, they must consider whether that interest ought to be disclosed, and where appropriate, they must withdraw from the meeting while that application is discussed and voted upon. When we've finished our session, I'll read out the recommendations set out in the published application report, and the members will vote on the recommendation by raising their hands. When the decision is made, that's normally the end of the matter for this subcommittee. The applicant may appeal our decision and objectors may seek legal redress. Finally, depending on how the meeting this evening progresses, we'll take a short break at around 8 p.m. We'll now go to the published meeting's order of business, beginning with item 1, apologies for absence.
Chair, we have 3 apologies from committee members this evening: Councillor Joseph, Councillor Young, and Councillor Potter.
Great, thank you very much, Gareth. Item 2, any declarations of interest from any of the subcommittee members? No? Great, thank you. Item 3, Gareth, have there been any proposals or questions referred to us?
None at all, Chair.
Thank you very much. You will see that minutes of the previous meeting are not yet ready to be agreed, so they'll come to the meeting the next meeting later on this month. And that means we move on to item 5, which is 180 Bethune Road, led by Gerard. If we could dim the lights slightly, that would be great. Thank you. And then as soon as that's happened, Gerard, you will please start.
Thank you, Chair, councillors. This item, agenda item 5, relates to a sites of 180 Bethune Road, 105 Cranich Road, and also at 91 Amherst Park. Now, just by way of background, planning permission for the was granted on appeal some years ago. The details are in the report agenda. And so the school has been operating. You can see here the extent of the wider site, which is the land, totally outlined in blue, and the land outlined in red is the application site for this proposal under consideration. I've got some photographs here. It's difficult to capture the whole extent in a single picture, but this is the side elevation, the return elevation of number 91 Amherst Park itself. You can see that that's a Victorian villa, with Amherst Park itself to the left of the photograph. And immediately to the right of the villa is a modern glass element linking the Victorian villa to a modern red brick 3-story building. You can just see that element in slightly greater detail there. And this is the part of the school building. And you can see then that extends for some distance down Bethune Road, and to the south on that side of Bethune Road, on the east side of Bethune Road, are essentially 2-story dwellings, most of which now have habitable accommodation in the roofs, although the one immediately adjacent, number 178, does not. Now, what's being proposed here is the erection of a 1-story upward extension to the modern brick school building itself, with no other elements of the site being affected. It would be set back from the front elevation by 1 metre, and on the southern end, the bit that's outlined in grey, that would be set back from the front elevation by 4 metres, and that element would be 5 metres wide. And so if we look at the plan, the drawing plan, we can see that on the new 3rd floor, there would be some offices, an office for the special education needs officers, and an admin office, and a library for the school. And on the roof, some of the existing plant would be relocated, and existing plant and new plant would be provided, and it's mainly concentrated at the southern end of the roof. This would be the rear elevation, and you could see on the drawing that it would be stepped back slightly at the southern end of the building. And this is the south elevation, so the view as you're looking up the hill from the south. And this is the north elevation, so looking from the building at 91 Amherst Park. The school was granted planning permission on appeal, and there are conditions attached to that restricting pupil number. The school is operating in excess of those approved numbers, but this is a matter that's being dealt with by the council's planning enforcement department. And what we're being asked to assess today is the acceptability of the extension itself. And this extension would not serve to increase pupil numbers. It would merely be to provide additional facilities in the form of a library and office space. And so it would have no impact on pupil numbers or the hours of operation of the school. So I'm looking to some reason this seems to have frozen. Now, in terms of the townscape analysis, officers have looked at the scheme and considered that this single-storey extension setback and in a contrasting material would be acceptable on this modern part of the school building. Now, we have had a number of representations objecting to the proposal. Now, many of these representations refer to the current operation of the school, which is not affected by this application under consideration. They've also raised concerns that the proposal would result in a loss of light and have an overbearing appearance when viewed from the rear of properties in Amherst Park. If I just scroll back in the drawings, so we're looking at the properties from 83 to 89 Amherst Park, which are located to the north and to the east of where the extension is proposed to be. And this separation distance and the orientation of the properties are considered to be such that it wouldn't result in any significant loss of light to those properties in Amherst Park, or give rise to an overbearing appearance or an increased sense of enclosure. As I say, other matters will be addressed in the council's enforcement department, but this application is purely for the extension to the school, and it is recommended that the application be approved subject to conditions.
Great, thank you very much. Could we raise the lights from around that? Great, thank you. We have objectors in attendance. We have Max Lincoln. Yeah, thank you. And Simon Jones. Great, thank you. You've got 5 minutes to share if you're both planning to speak. Can I just check whether that's the case? Share, yeah.
Yeah, so 2.5 minutes each.
Right, okay, fine. Do you need to be told when it's 2.5 minutes?
If you could, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great, fantastic. And otherwise, who's going first? Great, okay, so Simon, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity to object to this planning application 2020-3812. My name is Simon Jones. I'm the director of The Trees, the property which is located directly north and adjacent to the school. It comprises 25 flats and 45 residents. We are representing The Trees residents and all the neighbours in both adjoining roads whose lives are negatively impacted by the school on a daily basis. This includes Kate and all her colleagues in 101 Cronage Road. A brief history. In 2010, the site was a peaceful tree-lined orchard. First evidence the site had changed hands was the trees were all cut down, and there was then the constant noise all day of pupils in the play area. The school had been placed there illegally with no planning permission. The local residents complained to Hackney Planning, who placed an enforcement order on the site. The school then applied for retrospective planning permission, but continued to operate. This application was turned down by Hackney Planning. The case then went to the Planning Inspectorate, who, after a public meeting and site visit, provided planning permission with a number of conditions, one of which is dated the 22nd of May 2012, page 11, section 3 of the appeal decision states very clearly that 270 children shall be accommodated at the premises at any one time. We note in the planning documents 6.1.3 there are currently over 600 pupils in that site. There are no ifs and buts. There are over 270 pupils there. This is the condition under which the school was allowed to be built, and it must be adhered to. The school is in breach of this condition, which needs to be enforced by Hackney Planning, and our recommendation is the planning application to expand the school is retracted. I'll then pass on to Max.
Okay, so 6.5.1/2, the proposal would 100% reduce the light of nearby properties, particularly for the basement flats of the trees in Amherst Park to the north. These flats are already overlooked to exacerbate things. The drawings provided are unclear and do not fully show the effect of massing on residents of the trees. I mean, you just didn't see any of the pictures of the other angles as well, just to point that out. 6.5.3, it's noted that the flat roof has unacceptable levels of overlooking of neighbouring properties. Once it's built, there's no way that the neighbours can enforce this or do much to prevent the school from using it. The school has already built on the rear elevated terrace overlooking the properties without planning permission. Photos were submitted with our object has little regard for planning rules. 6.5.4, the school may be located in the community it serves, but why should local residents suffer from greater noise pollution Monday to Friday and on Sunday? This includes the frequent use of tannoy/loudspeaker on Sundays being extremely disruptive and unneighbourly. 6.6.2, the TA is difficult to assess. 6.6.3, TA does not adequately explain the existing transport context and trip generation. And this reflects the reality for residents. Morning, lunchtime, and afternoon, there are large periods of extreme congestion in the area, honking horns, road rage. Despite the pupils using minibuses, many are driven in large cars. It's dangerous to cyclists. As a regular cyclist, I've nearly been knocked on my bike multiple times by aggressive drivers of minibuses and their parents. This extension will solidify the allowance of more pupils and will allow them to likely expand their numbers further, leading to a greater lack of safety for local residents, plus further noise problems. School vehicles alongside parents have frequently been trespassing on our drive, our private property, to unload pupils. I've spoken to a parent who's incredibly rude despite trespassing. So you can see this is already an issue. And whilst, it's saying that they're not building any more classrooms, how can this necessarily be enforced further down the line? I'd like to raise that point. As they already have far more students than they need. Where are these students going? Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you very much. We have supporting Joel Stern, hi, from SEN Planning, and Sruli Groman as well. Hi there. Are you both speaking? Just one person speaking? Great, okay. When you're ready, you're more than welcome to start.
Okay. I get the point from the objectors. The main point of the objectors is the impact of this site being a school for the neighbors, and that's unfortunate. But I think tonight we're not speaking about if this should be a school or shouldn't be a school, because the merits it should be a school outweighs more than everything else, because at the moment in Hackney, the private schooling actually is much more than the public schools, meaning to say that in the private schools we're growing and in the public schools is declining. At the moment, there's around 9,000 kids should be in the private schooling. However, there's only space for 7,933. So I want to speak only about this site and about this particular proposal, where the site impact was already discussed in appeal, and it was won already 10 years ago, showing that the need of schools outweighs all around. And of course, the school does try to keep it to the minimum and not to harm any neighbors. And that's why I was introduced quite a lot of things. Like if you walk down Amherst Park on 8 a.m. in the morning, you'll see hundreds of kids walking to school rather than going by cars or going by minibuses. You'll see it's amazing, actually amazing spectacle to have a look at it. If you stand by that corner in Sainsbury's to see it. So the impact of having a school was discussed in appeal, approved in appeal. This proposal mainly just wants to give the kids a bit more enjoyment to enjoy the school. As we know that the houses are getting smaller and smaller, living in London is getting more and more restricted. So when my father-in-law got married, he moved into a 6-bedroom house with 2 kids, right? When I had 5 kids in a 2-bedroom house, just to give a bit concept how we live. So we do try in schools to give a bit extra space. So we are actually proposing on this floor to have a Senko room where we do need urgently Senko looking after the kids, and where they do need bright spaces, and the need of Senko comes because of people not having enough space. Again, we propose a library where you don't have place to put books in your house because it's so small. It should be for the enjoyment of the pupils we look after. And again, a main office where this is not going to increase. I do note your concern about increasement. Just to throw in a point there, actually Ofsted did evaluate this school, and they thought that this school can actually accommodate 1,000 kids. That's all in the Ofsted report. But the dealing between 270 and 500 kids is being dealt with enforcement, and we are dealing with them and mitigating, and we will get to it. But this is not the question that's in front of you today. The question is, should this school, which this place, allowed to be a bit bigger? And does it comply with design? Yes, it does comply with design. Doesn't comply with all other regs? Yes, because we worked very hard with the planning team to fine-tune it and fine-tune it until we got the right design, right, and we did actually mitigate all points of refusal. So I hope we get it approved today.
Great, thank you very much. Right, members, we can move to questions. Yeah, Councillor Narcross, you kick us off.
In 4.10 on page 15, it says that it was very difficult to assess the transport assessment documents because they didn't cite, and that they'd requested them to be reworked. Were they submitted, or are we still working off the ones that were difficult to assess?
So Gerard, I think first to you about the transport plan, and Gerard, can I just add as well, if the committee is not considering numbers, what's the impact of the transport plan that's part of this?
Well, in terms of the transport plan, because it wouldn't change the numbers, it wouldn't really have an impact on the transport. It wouldn't have an impact on the transport impacts of the proposal. And the comments of our network and transportation colleagues are the transport assessment is difficult to read. However, that is not the matter that is before us. And I do know that there will be some wider proposals for the school as a whole, which can then be addressed. That can then be addressed in a more comprehensive manner. But in regards to this particular application, the proposal doesn't envisage any active changes to the existing transport arrangements. But as from my understanding, the school is keen to promote a greater use of sustainable transport, and I'm sure all schools do generate some form of transport activity, especially at dropping off and picking up times.
So yeah, just kind of on a sort of similar subject, and obviously, as you said, Chair, we're not here to talk about the numbers issue, but just sort of my own clarification of how the fact that this site is currently subject to an enforcement investigation or enforcement cases is put here to do with numbers, how that does that then having applications on the site, particularly given that the enforcement cases around capacity and occupation, and we are, whilst not extending it to increase the numbers, we are extending the floor space of something that's already under enforcement case.
Gerard, do you want to take that and then maybe John?
Yes, I will say that at the moment, so the school is under investigation by the enforcement department, although we have not taken any formal enforcement action. And as such, we are able to assess this application, especially as the impact. The enforcement investigation is in relation to pupil numbers, and this proposal does not propose to increase those pupil numbers. And in my view, the two matters can be dealt with separately, but I will defer the matter to Mr. Sang, the DM&E manager.
Thanks, Gerard. Yes, just to reiterate what Gerard says, this matter is purely to deal with the proposed roof extension. Enforcement officers, the applicants, in order to resolve the matter relating to the pupil numbers. But as proposed, and we have to accept in good faith that the proposal is purely for a roof extension to provide the facilities that's been submitted on the plans. So we are able to proceed with an application on this basis.
Okay, thanks a lot. Councillor Desmond, then Councillor Sadek.
So when this was originally agreed to be a school after the procedures 10 years ago, was there any mechanism provided at that time for neighbours who obviously have concerns and have a right to have a peaceable life, for them to make representations to the school without the need for antagonism or argument, but a mechanism for them to input their concerns? And if this goes through, is such a mechanism going to be available either through the governors or through some other coordinated effort?
I think Councillor Desmond, I don't think, certainly not in the past, it's not a planning consideration. I'd say if you could rephrase it around potentially a noise condition.
Are you able, if this is agreed by the committee, there will be a mechanism because of the expressions of concern about noise and nuisance, whereby local people can make representations that can be considered by the school on the basis that they're not banging on the head teacher's door, screaming like mad, but there's a mechanism where they can make representations and they can be looked at seriously?
The school where I do deal with a lot of schools, I'm sure there is such a mechanism. I'm not familiar with it, but I can reassure that if it goes through, we will put something into place, because they're working very hard with the PR team to get the neighbors on board, because they're not trying to antagonize anyone. We want to live in peace. We're here to, kids should have a school where to go. On the other hand, people should have where to live.
Councillor Sadek, I'll come back to the Councillor Sadek, thank you.
I wanted to follow up on the point about pupil numbers, and I fully recognise that the enforcement issue is separate to today's decision and isn't a relevant planning consideration, but we are being asked to approve a set of recommendations containing a number of conditions, and it feels to me that the sort of an assessment by the council of the likelihood of compliance with conditionality that the council imposes on an applicant is relevant to our assessment, and just wondered what you've not reached a view on the enforcement issue, but do your views as it stand on the likelihood of compliance with conditionality have any bearing on today's decision?
Thank you for that question, councillors. It is a matter, and it has been clarified through various appeals and court cases that the applicant's conduct and the likelihood of compliance with conditions is not a matter for our consideration. Obviously, the conditions would be imposed, and the local planning authority does have powers to require compliance with those conditions through its enforcement department. But it's one of those things, impose them, and the appellant, the applicant accepts them in good faith. It's a different scenario. I don't know, councillor, if you're familiar with the licensing regime, which is, yeah, there are different criteria that would apply for that. But in planning, we have to, you know, take things on face value.
Yeah, Christine?
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. Can I just remind members this afternoon that we are here in regards to this additional extension, which is according to the report and officers, as well as the applicant has stressed and stated that it's going to be used for library facilities and also for special educational needs, as well as an office. Therefore, can we sort of like, any questions are going to be raised is in light of the application and try to refine it that way. It is understood that there is an enforcement case going with regards to the number of students and possible other factors with regards to noise. But if we could limit our questions based on the application before us, it would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Samatar.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, I just wanted to quickly ask a question on page 21, 6.5. It says about the loss of light to nearby properties to the north and would have overbearing appearance when viewed on those properties. Just wanted to get a bit clarification on that, please.
Thank you. Gerard.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Yes, paragraph 6.5.1 to the representations objecting to the and to the matters, you know, those relevant matters. And the following section, 6.5.2, goes on that the proposal would increase the bulk of the school. It's an upward extension, the school will be bigger. But it then goes on to describe where the application, and it goes on, yeah, in my professional opinion, the increased bulk of the school would not have a significant impact on the light levels at the neighbouring properties of the trees, including to those basement flats referred to. And also would not have a significant increased overbearing appearance when compared to the existing situation.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Okay, I think most of mine are covered off by the conditions. So the green roof, Gerard, will be, well, the flat roof will be a green roof and will be conditioned against use as a terrace or access, general access, is that right?
Yes, that's correct, Chair. And if we impose the condition restricting the use, preventing it being used as a terrace or amenity area, then again, that is something that we can take enforcement action necessary.
And then in terms of the condition on noise from the plant on the top, so 8.1.9, 5 decibels, is that standard? Is that what would usually be asked?
Yes, that is correct, Chair. That is a standard plant noise condition.
Councillor Narcos?
Sorry, this is a sort of a question on process more than anything. So obviously, you know, the sort of the nearby residents here have sort of raised concerns that don't fall within the view of this committee. They're not material planning considerations. Would there ever be a situation, would it ever be appropriate that a condition of a planning application is that ongoing enforcement action is concluded before it can start? And sort of, would that go some way to sort of alleviate concerns of residents on the development?
I think the answer is no, because it's a totally separate process. But John, do you want to?
Yes, Chair, just to confirm that each application will be considered on its own merit, so we can't make this application dependent on another separate application.
Okay. Right. Councillor Sadek?
I just had a question about the works themselves and when they've been undertaken, and I suppose just how the school thinking about students, but also thinking about local residents, how I suppose the development of this extension would be managed, and how you manage the impact on residents and students of that.
So I suppose that comes down to construction management plan, doesn't it, Gerard?
Yes, but well, for development of this scale, which is a relatively small scale, it's about 450 square meters of development. It's not the sort of scale of proposal that we would be seeking a construction management plan for. Amherst Road, so Amherst Park itself is the borough distributor roads and is relatively heavily. Bethune Road is a relatively wide road. Hours of construction activity and noisy construction activity are covered by other legislation, and obviously, I think the school would be keen to ensure that the school to continue operating during that process. And with regards to the neighbours, then obviously any parking of construction vehicles would need to be dealt with through the transportation licensing scheme. And as I say, the hours of construction activity are controlled by other legislation.
Satisfactory. Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay, in that case, we'll move to a vote, please. So the recommendation summary is to grant planning permission subject to conditions. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Thank you. That's unanimous. Okay, so thank you for everyone joining us to speak. We move on to item 6. And we have speakers, so we'll just wait for objects and applicants to vacate and swap over. Can I also just point committee members to the addendum sheets? So there's a slight change to item 6 and item 7.
Just to check, committee members.
You wouldn't
Yeah.
mind, that'd be great.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. So,
And then
Gabby?
have we got a Gabby Brown? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so thank you everyone. Item 6, 51 to 57 Amherst Park, and we're being led by Catherine. As soon as the lights are down, Catherine, you're welcome to start.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, councillors. My name's Catherine Nicol. I'm a Senior Planning Officer in the Development Management team. Tonight I am presenting item 6 on the agenda. I first wanted to draw your attention to the addendum. The committee report incorrectly states that the number of existing students is 621. However, the actual number is 802. And just to clarify, the proposal has been assessed on the basis of 802 students. The documents, including management plan and travel statements, have all referenced 802. So this is the site. It's an independent school located at 51 to 57 Amherst Park, located within the Woodbury Down ward. The school has arisen over the passage of time, established sometime in the 1990s or prior. As such, the application site currently has not been the subject of planning permission, and the council currently has no control over student numbers. The application itself is a resubmission of a previous planning application, which was resolved to be approved by members at Planning Committee in 2018. That was subject to conditions in a Section 106 legal agreement. However, due to the cyber attack, the files required to complete the Section 106 agreement were lost, and the decision was not issued or implemented. As such, this is just a resubmission of a scheme that has been. The planning application is Planning Committee this evening due to the number of objections the council have received. The objections relate to design, residential amenity, transport and highways impact. So the application site is a 3-story building located on the southern side of Amherst Park. The existing building is currently in use as an independent school. It has an existing rear. The surrounding uses are predominantly residential, with an existing school located east of the site at number 49 at Amherst Park. The site is not located within a conservation area and not within the vicinity of any locally or statutory listed buildings. This is the existing typical layout of the internal floors of the school, the existing drawings and elevation. And then this is the school at the rear, just in a Google aerial image. So the proposal seeks a single-story roof extension with a habitable roof level as well, seeking to provide additional floor space to the existing independent school. The proposal would not increase the number of students. The roof extension is simply to accommodate better accommodation on site for the existing number of students. As you can see in the elevation drawings, the proposed roof extension has been designed to replicate the lower floors and will be finished with a matching pitched roof profile. The proposed materials would also match the existing building and is considered to be in keeping with the host school building. The additional floors, classrooms, staff toilets, and toilets, sorry. So this is the 3rd floor and then just the internal of the roof. And then the proposed roof plan with dormers and some roof lights. Just the front again, and this is the site looking down east towards the site from Amherst Park. The building in the forefront is 4 stories. The buildings east past the site are 2 stories. The buildings opposite the site on Amherst Park are between stories in their apartment blocks. Several objections have been raised in relation to the height of the roof extension. The existing building is 3 stories and the design approach of the extension would make it as a 4-story building. The scale and massing has been considered by officers and we consider it to be acceptable as it would be subservient within the wider context of Amherst Park. Several objections have also been raised in relation to the impact on residential amenity of the neighbouring properties, the main ones to the Bergholt Crescent at the south of the site. As shown by the red line, the yellow line, sorry, the distance from the nearest residential windows of Bergholt Crescent and the windows of the existing school building is at least 30 metres. Given the orientation that they are south of the application site and the sufficient setback, officers do not consider the proposed roof extension to result in any harm to the residential neighbours. A daylight sunlight assessment was also submitted with the application, which confirms that the development would not result in the loss of daylight or sunlight to adjacent residential occupants. So to conclude, the development delivers a roof extension to an existing independent school, which is going to provide additional space and improve the overall standard of the existing school. There will be no increase in pupil numbers. The development would not give rise to any significant off-site amenity or highways impacts. All other material planning considerations have been covered within the officer report. Officers recommend the approval of this planning application, subject to conditions and the completion of a Section 106 legal agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And here objecting, we have Gabby Brown. Yeah. Gabby, you've got up to 5 minutes. And it's the bottom right-hand white button to turn yourself on. There you go.
Got it.
So as soon as you're ready, you're more than welcome to start.
Okay, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is Gabby Brown. I live in Bergholt Crescent and I'm here speaking on behalf of many of my neighbours in the street. And excuse me if I speak more on an emotional basis. I'm not a planner and this is my home that we're speaking about. Firstly, I'd like to make it clear that I love Stamford Hill. I've lived there since 1991. I was married in the new synagogue in Egerton Road, and my 3 children attended a Jewish school in the locality, a wonderful school. What I love particularly about Stamford Hill is the energy and commitment to Judaism that I see there every day. I respect and admire the Haredi community, and I enjoy being connected not only with my own heritage, going back to Rabbi John Cohn of Ravitz, Alav Shalom, but with my relatives and friends now in the Orthodox community. But I do think there is an issue here that's not being properly addressed, and I would like to address Mr. Stern, who I've met before, which is weighing up sometimes different needs of different parts of the community. And I really appreciated what that councillor said. They're talking to each other, because I do feel that many of our mainstream Jewish and non-Jewish friends are actually leaving the area. This lady's moving out because they feel their needs are not considered important and they're not getting the support. And it's a kind of ethnic cleansing by degrees. And I think Stamford Hill works best when it's diverse and mixed and a cultural melting pot. And work needs to be done on maintaining the balance. And I do think there's a risk that you are committing a Hillel Hashem into disrepute by riding roughshod over the needs of your neighbours, by only prioritising the needs of your community when it could be done in harmony and in collaboration together, that there should be some sort of mechanism for us all to live together. As I see that the application has already been recommended for approval, I'm going to address what I think are necessary mitigations to protect the area's residents. I would say that our biggest concern by far, apart from privacy, is noise. Over the 3 decades that I've lived in my own house, it's become a bigger and bigger problem. There are more events, more speakers, more amplification and more music. I mean, I've been actually brought to tears at times by the fact I've been unable to work because of the amount of noise in study. More sports are being conducted in a smaller space. Playtimes and sports lessons now merge, so there's no respite for us. And obviously, everybody's working from home more than they used to. So these are the mitigations I would like to see. In the thousands of hours and hundreds of thousands of pounds that you've obviously spent on this application, there's no evidence to me that you spent a single moment thinking about how you're going to protect your neighbours from the consequences of this development. The school, I mean, I just think the school needs to be mandated to address the noise problem, and it's massive, as a condition of approval. What can you do better in terms of soundproofing? Can you plant a row of trees? Can you substitute the hard surfaces for AstroTurf? You know, this should be a condition of you proceeding, that there should be some sort of mitigations in place that are going to protect us. The porta cabins, should I say the illegal porta cabins in the playground, have to go. They now funnel sound. The girls play very noisy games in the playground and the teachers use loud hailers all the time. And the porta cabins, they compress the sound and they send it over into our gardens and into our houses. I feel there should be no use of the premises at all on Shabbat or on Sunday. I think loud hailers, loudspeakers and amplification of any sort in the school playground at any time of day. I think the school should timetable sports so it is not continuous but confined to set times. And this is going to sound actually risible, but those girls need to be discouraged. The teachers, I hear the teachers egging them on that they've got 2 teams against each other. And most importantly, I think the school needs to find alternative venues off-site, especially for events where they're using loud hailers and they've got teams. This is very common in other parts of London. Regent's Park is used extensively by schools. So why, when you have a very, very small playground and you're going to have more, you know, hard surfaces. Sorry. Anyway, my final point is that I was going to say you should convene a forum with the neighbours so that we can discuss these matters. And I don't like the us and them approach to it.
That's time. Thank you. Thank you very much. And then supporting, we have Joel Stern and Trudy Groman again. Joel, are you speaking for 5 minutes? Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. When you're ready.
I'll be a bit discussing your points, and I'll be facing you for literally a minute just to, everyone knows me in Stamford Hill, and my contact details is widely known. and I'm a person widely known in the community that I do engage, and there was something that says throughout this application, the past 5 years when it was already approved the first time, as well now the second time where I was never approached by yourselves or by your colleagues, where it was widely known that this is going to go through at some point because it went through already once. Now you have a real opportunity because legally this school can tomorrow take in 5,000 kids on the site because there's no condition telling them you can't have 5,000 kids. So think about tomorrow morning, 5,000 people. This application is going to help you actually, because it's going to limit you to 802 children. So this is for you. It's help for the school, but most importantly for yourself. While doing that, we did actually take into account the daylight, where we are over, like the officers and Catherine said, that we're over 50 meters away. You're talking about the porter cabins, where it's not part of this application, but actually porter cabins in 2001 already. And so we could discuss about some part of this application. The question in front of us, councillors, is, will this harm the character? And the answer is, of course, not. Will this make it better? The answer is yes. And here's the opportunity to actually limit the numbers to not have 1,000 children or 2,000. You can only have 800, where it fits into the school and just gives more space. And all the urgent point is, by having this extra floor, it will give more internal space as well to take away from the garden. It will help you. So 2 things. Number one, this application will actually help you the most while it's helping the school. And number 2, anytime you want, you can just Google me. So I'm here, and after this meeting, I'm available to speak as well. Thank you, councillors.
Okay, so members, thank you. So members of the planning committee, as ever, the applicants and the objectors are welcome to use their time in whatever way they wish, but our job is to comment, question on the application at hand. So, questions from the committee? Yeah, Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, the application, is recommended to approval and doesn't have an increase in pupil numbers, but it seems that the residents' main concern is how you manage the students at the moment, particularly with the megaphones. I mean, is there anything that you can say in regards to that? It just seems like quite a small area in the playground. Is there any kind of hope that you can give them or management as to not needing the megaphones?
Sorry, Councillor Webb, what's the question on the application?
Well, it's the noise. The noise seems to be the concern of the neighbours. I just wondered if there was anything that they could say to make them feel
So
better.
can you ask the case officer about the noise maybe first? So frame your question around noise to the case officer. So Catherine, I'll do it then in that case. Is it like an roof extension to a school? We've heard that noise is an issue throughout the day. What bearing does that have on this application? Are there any conditions currently on it? Can you give us a bit of an overview of that? That'd be great.
So because this is an existing school with no previous planning permissions, there's not currently a mechanism that we can use to monitor noise as such on site. And then because this isn't proposing to expand the numbers or intensify the use in any way, we don't have anything we could reasonably attach. What we have opted to do is cap the number of maximum students to existing. That's just a means to reduce further numbers on site. Yeah.
And just on the numbers, is this the first time this condition on school pupil numbers has been attached because this is an extension, or is it a change to a condition?
Yeah, so it was originally attached on the previous approval, but because it was never implemented, that's void. So this will be the first time a condition like that would be attached on site.
Thank you. Councillor Desmond, then Councillor Narkos.
Yeah, I'd like to ask the case officer, and I hope, this with noise, this isn't within a conservation area, but Bergholt Crescent, which is one Hackney, is literally next door, just on the very edge. Even though our development isn't within that conservation area, I'm sure Bergholt Crescent is a conservation area. Does the impact of this development to Bergholt Crescent have a conservation relevance?
So I was just going to see if it's close to a conservation area. Can't remember off the top of my. But in terms of the design assessment, it's still going to be the same. It's like a single-story roof extension. It's viewed within the range of heights of Amherst Park. So, and it's matching materials, matching detailing, and even the pitched roof is. So, yeah, we have concluded that it would be acceptable.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Sorry. Sorry, I said Councillor Narcross and then Councillor Leaving.
Yeah, so it was just a question on the condition that cap the numbers. So obviously, this is the first time there's been a number cap on the site. That is capping it at the number of students who are currently there. Is that number being capped at that just because that's how many there currently are, or is that because that's been deemed an appropriate maximum for the size of the site? Because obviously it's a huge site. There's not a great amount of outdoor space that has kind of noise implications. I was just wondering what sort of process led you to that cap?
John?
Thanks, Councillor. I think the question was relating to how we came up with the figure that we've capped as part of this condition. The numbers are as existing, so the pupil numbers referenced in the report is the number of pupil numbers that are operating at the school at the moment. We've got to bear in mind that the school currently operates without any cap, with no restriction at all. So we've taken this opportunity to impose a condition so that no more students can operate beyond that number in planning terms.
And John, the amendment the addendum has amended that up to 802 from the 621 that was there beforehand. Why has it changed in between the report back and this addendum? Oh, sorry, Kate, in that case. Sorry.
That was just a mistake in the report writing, but the transport statements and everything have been assessed at 802 is an error.
And where do we get that number from?
That's been provided by the applicants. So there's a travel plan and travel statement that's assessed sort of how people come to the school, and there's been surveys and things. So that's the number that has been presented to us.
Okay. And was the number that the applicants provided always 802?
Yes.
So it's just a simple mistake in the report. Okay, fine. Thank you. Is that okay, Councillor Narcross?
I guess sort of what I was trying to understand was obviously that is a number that is currently there, but whether there's any, as part of this process of assessment, whether that number is a suitable number for the size of that site. Because if there's not been a cap before, you could theoretically, as the gentleman said, have 5,000 students turn up there one day, and they could all be let in, and that wouldn't be breaking any kind of planning considerations or cap. So as obviously it's been capped as is, but is there an assessment being made whether that's an appropriate number given the size constraints of the site?
I suppose just from the chair's point of view, it'd probably be an unreasonable number than current numbers. And then can you just enlighten us about what policy would be around school numbers generally when applying a planning application, and why that's different in this case? It is.
Yeah, so there's no policies with the land or local plan that indicates an appropriate number of students for an independent. There is nothing, like there's no baseline or something to base it off. If it was like a mainstream school, there are some regulations that can be used based off like GIA calculations. I have had a little look, so it would work out to be like 19 students per classroom or something. But yeah. No, it's not really relevant for an independent school, and there's nothing in policy terms to guide us.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Levy, then Councillor Samatar.
Thank you, Chair. It's not really a question, it's more by way of comment, I think. Having read through the officer's report, it's essentially a rehash of the previously approved commission, which on a committee that I sat on 5 years ago. And unfortunately, through no fault of their own, the school weren't able to implement this. And I can't find the objections, the same objections I suspect were heard then, and it's difficult to tease out any further materiality here in this particular application. I just wondered whether that has a particular bearing now, today, rather than that was heard 5 years ago, which I can't find. I just wondered whether there was anything materially different to this application than the one that was approved previously.
Because the only way in which it's material is that the planning application has already passed previously, so it would be odd if it were not passed this changes to the application. So the application, I think you same as the application last time.
Yeah,
It has already gone through on this basis, but the lack of section 106 due to the cyber attack. Okay, thank you, Councillor Levy. Councillor Samatar.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to kind of, I was trying so hard when you were speaking to try and find something related directly to the roof itself, and it was more about the school itself and the behavior of the students itself. So is there any way like there could be some sort of understanding from that angle of, I'm not sure if the school is connected to like kind of the behavior enforcement side and different things, but whereas when we're looking at the structure itself, I'm not seeing many things from here, from the lights and like the overall things were my main things, but the team have already covered that. But the issue seems to be going back to the number of students and the behavior of, you know, of this, the impact that's having on the nearby neighbours.
Okay, so I think, thank you for that. So I think our job here is quite a specific one. It's around the planning application for the building and then all the material planning matters around that. I think, you know, in terms of community engagement, things like that, it's not really our job. It's the job of local councils, local community organisations and otherwise to sort that out in a wider sense. But I think we've kind of talked about the noise already because it's an extension. The case officer has sort of covered that. So I think lots of people try to sort of make the planning process something that's not. It's, you know, the planning process is a planning process. We've got a body of sort of at least 3 or 4 frameworks that we work within around sort of nationally and locally set rules, really. So that's what we work within.
Sorry, Chair, can I just please clarify 2 things, just for language sake? I know because people at home might be a bit confused as well. When you were speaking, you said the council has no control over the number of students. And when you were speaking, you said there's no legal limit on how many kids that can be in the school. And then now, later on, there was a conversation about a cap being on the number of students. Just for the sake of language, I just need to get that clarification on that.
So I think from the report perspective, from the officer's perspective, the condition is essentially there is no national sort of policy guidance, is what case officer said earlier on, but the council has decided to add a condition that says, which is condition not on it. Sort of the report. So condition, if you can help me, Kate, do please do it now. School numbers, so it's condition 5 under recommendation A, although bear in mind that it's amended to 802. So the council officers, planning department have chosen to add a condition that on the current site, with the extension, there should be no more. So within the powers on the sort of authority of the planning department within the planning system here, there's been a condition added, but that's based again, as we discussed, on the number of pupils currently enrolled at the school. So then that can be enforced against within planning terms later if the cap is breached. Sorry, Catherine. Okay, was that right? Yep. Great. Is that okay, Councillor Samatar? Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Sadek.
Thanks, Chair. I just had one more, hopefully very simple clarification question on that 802 figure and how it was arrived at. I totally get the point on it, not questioning the appropriateness of that figure, but you mentioned that figure was provided to you by the school with some sort of plan, not explaining the methodology for how they get there. I just wondered what the council did to test that.
The veracity of the figure, I suppose.
Yeah, Councillor, we had to take into account the unrestricted operation. So we didn't necessarily have to assess the limits that the pupil numbers can accommodate the school with. And we felt that by adding these additional conditions, it would maintain the amenity of neighbouring occupiers in its current form. Just to stress, in addition to planning controls, there are other requirements that the schools have to adhere to. There are also Ofsted requirements who also have a register, pupil roll register on their books, as well as environmental health legislation, which would address any noise and disturbance issues.
Just to clarify, I think Councillor Sadek's question is around the 802 number has been given. How does the council know, or does it not matter whether there are actually 802 pupils in attendance or on the rolls at the moment, rather than say 602, but with the capacity to go up for another 200?
Again, we have to be very mindful of the unrestricted numbers it can go up to, and we've accepted in good faith, because that's what's stated in the planning application form and the submissions and the Ofsted reports, so that's the number that's been provided. Correct.
Okay. And I suppose the other sort of point around this is that it's a private school. So it's not a state school, so they don't have state roles per se. Great. Any other questions online or anything else? No? Okay. In that case, we'll move to a vote. Thank you. So the recommendation summary on item 6, which 51 to 57 Amherst Park, is grant planning permission subject to conditions and completion of section 106 legal agreement. And all those in favour, please raise your hands. Thank you. That's unanimous again. So thank you very much. Thank you to the speakers and everyone who attended. We'll move on to item 7, which is Springdale Mews. And we have some speakers, so we'll just wait for objectors and applicants to move. Oh, sorry. Okay. Neil. Great. Okay. Thank you very much. Let's move on to item 7, Springdale Mews, which will be known to many of you. We have Gerard leading us off. So if we could just lower the lights, that would be great. Thank you. And then Gerard, as soon as you're ready, please carry on.
Okay, thank you, Chair, councillors. So this was discussed at the planning subcommittee last month, and there was a significant debate in the chamber regarding this, and subsequent to that, the applicants have agreed to supply some additional information which serves to amplify the construction management and logistics plan. The whole of the report is presented because, for the purposes of and for the avoidance of doubt. Again, the details of the windows and doors are as previously proposed, as is the landscaping, as is the tree protection. And when it comes to construction management, the vehicle paths are the same. Again, we have that here. There is a slight change in the storage area for the construction material B at 1E Springdale Mews. Apparently they do have the agreement of the landowner there to do that. And with regards to construction management, I would draw members' attention to paragraphs 6.2.7 on page 75 of the agenda and 6.2.12 the agenda. And what this additional information indicates is in 627 is that the collection and deliveries will be done by vehicles with a maximum mass of 7.5 tons. And they've detailed the number of trips, up to 10 trips a day for 4 weeks for the excavation period and 1 to 2 per day thereafter. Now, with regards to this size network and transportation, managers have been consulted as reported in the addendum, and they consider that the access to the mews is sufficient to allow those vehicles to be able to go in. Obviously, care would need to be taken. Presumably that would be through the use of a banks person, which is standard practice in any kind of construction activity. And with regards to the other main area that was raised at the previous committee, I'll refer you to paragraph 6.2, and that in order to lay down the utilities in terms of electricity, drainage and water, it's proposed that it would be excavated in a 1 meter increment, with them being covered with a steel plate capable of supporting a vehicle about 40 tons, which is potentially unlikely in Springdale Mews. And that period would take maybe so now the utilities provision would be undertaken by themselves, and after the utilities have been installed, the mews itself would be resurfaced, and that actually forms part of the legal agreement attached to the substantive grant of planning application. So this application has been referred back to the members because it sort of seeks to amplify the information that was considered acceptable, and the recommendation is that it be approved. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Gerard. We have no one objecting to this this evening. In terms of supporters, we have Leanne Buckley-Thompson. I assume that's yourself. And then we have a couple of people, David Marjoram and Kieran Robinson, to answer questions. Leanne, you've got up to 5 minutes when the a minute left. Okay.
Thank you so much, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I've been introduced, but I'm a specialist planning barrister at number 5 Chambers, and I'm instructed by the applicant to speak on their behalf. My submission's obviously short, necessarily so. The committee conscientiously, I'm sure, read the most recent officer's report, the addendum to it, and I've also seen the amended construction management plan, the construction phase plan, and the site layout plan. I'm sure you're well versed with the issues at hand. The application, as was just said, was last considered on the 8th of June at committee. I obviously was not present at that time, but I have seen a recording of submissions made on behalf of an objector. Those submissions was condition 5. Now, of course, the application is not just about condition 5, it also relates to conditions 4, 7, 11, 12 and 15. Court recommended approval of the application in its as is the case now, as you've heard. And I just note that the objector last time didn't take issue with any of those conditions and the detail relating to those. So those, in my view, should plainly be discharged. But after submissions, the committee, as I understand it, deliberated, and the concerns that had been raised by the objector, had they been shared, the committee no doubt would have refused the application, or indeed could have deferred. But instead, and importantly, I say, I understand the committee resolved to approve the application on that occasion. Necessarily, therefore, the committee must have been satisfied, even on the basis of the detail provided last time, that the conditions could be discharged. To conclude otherwise, where there's a resolution to grant, would I say be illogical. And it wasn't irrational, I say, for the committee yourselves to take indeed a detailed construction management plan was provided, and when one considers the wording of condition 5, it makes sense the committee took that view. However, as has been outlined by your officer, there was a move to seek further information. My understanding is that there were concerns in relation to the possibility for judicial review. That further information was sought, and as has been detailed, a further officer's report provided. I think I have to say on behalf of my client that, with respect, that's a wholly unsatisfactory state of affairs for the applicant, not prompted by any change in circumstances warranting a move away from the resolution, because the objections were already known when the committee heard matters last time before the vote, but not to pray in aid of that. The applicant has diligently cooperated, I say, produced the revised documentation, it's been made available publicly, and the applicant is keen to work collaboratively with the council, but also local people, we want to emphasise. So the two issues then that information was sought in relation to were the number, frequency, site and size of construction vehicles, and also any temporary road or footway closures during the construction period. Just dealing with those very shortly. Further detail has now been provided as to vehicle sizes. Paragraphs 1.3 of the management plan, pages 4 and 6, make clear that a 7.5 tonne capacity vehicle will be used. There is, I'm told, a 7.5 tonne truck available of a width that can access the mews, and you've heard from your officer where to find that in the report. Detailed movements, that's section 2.3 of the plan on page 6, and it's emphasised that the applicant wants to very much assure local people that they are open to communication, that there's detail within the CMP as to how communication will take place. And then finally, in relation to road closures, section 4.1 of the plan on page 11 deals with that. The applicant not require road closures within the mews, private road, and the way the trenches will be dug won't require it. There's also a revised site layout plan, as has been discussed. This evening, a fair conclusion is that it's deemed satisfactory in terms of the additional detail, otherwise they would be here. I say, therefore, that there is sufficient information to now move to approve and issue an approval within very short order, given the delay that has been caused to the applicant so far. Just very briefly, and I can see the time's run out, I don't know if there is concern still about judicial review, but I should emphasise this. If there is, the threshold for that is very high indeed. And I say that the committee should make the decision based on what it sees to be the correct course of action despite that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, committee members, this is an application we saw last month. As Gerard set out, there are very few amendments to it, mostly around detail, I think size of vehicles, the trench for utilities, the access arrangements and site plans. So these are further details to essentially, which are essentially more restrictive. So adding details into the construction management plan and other documents. Does anyone have any questions? Gerard, size of vehicles, why, I think 7 tons, why that?
Well, that's, my understanding is that that's the sort of maximum size of vehicle in the Mews. A vehicle larger than that would be too wide.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No, in that case, thank you. Can we, if officers are happy, then can we move to a vote? The recommendation summary is to approve details. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Thank you, that's unanimous. Thank you very much for all of that work. Thank you to the officers. Great, that's the end of the substantive agenda. We have delegated decisions. Can you note, can the committee please note the delegated decisions document at the back of the pack? Noted, thank you very much. I've had any other business come to me other than that members will have noted there's an extra planning committee this month on the schedule for the 25th of July. That's to cover for, obviously we don't have one in August, and we do have some substantive applications that are coming through on that meeting. Other than that, I think, Gareth, we're done.
We are indeed, Chair. I'm not aware of any other items.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. Thanks to officers, thanks to Mario and everyone else online. And we'll see you at the end of July.